I would like to ask you a question. Can we use a Blackboard to teach trades, vocational trades? I think the answer is yes and no. I visited classrooms and I saw the teacher using the Blackboard, and he was doing a great job, especially when he was teaching concepts like math in the trades. Of course, you have to use a Blackboard. But are we using the Blackboard maybe a bit too much? Are you using the Blackboard a bit too much? Well, that's a very good question to ask ourselves. Why are we afraid sometimes to step away from the Blackboard and to use other methods to teach the students? One of the reasons why, or one of the barriers why maybe we could say we're stuck to the Blackboard, is maybe in our mind, we think that the only place really they can learn is inside a classroom. Is that it for you? I'm talking especially about trades here, vocational trades. It could be plumber, electrician, bricklayer, carpentry, welding. It could be mechanic. It could be even other trades, agriculture, especially those trades. Now, I think there's a lot that we can learn outside the classroom. We just have to be creative. Another barrier, another reasons why we might be stuck to the Blackboard, because that's the way we were taught. We were taught by a Blackboard and writing a lot of notes, and then we would take notes, and then after there would be a test. Now, was that the way you were taught your trade, the trade that you are teaching right now to your students? Now, I don't think that's a very good way to do it, like lecture style. I mean, there's a place for lecture. There's nothing wrong with it. But that's not the best way to teach a trade, by simply lecturing to your students. You have to get outside the classroom. You have to be creative. Now, maybe you're telling me, maybe you would like to tell me, in your mind, this is what you're thinking. Well, we don't have enough resources. And I visited vocational schools in developing countries where one of the big problems was having resources to teach their students. So there's not enough wood, bricks, or electrical supplies, or whatever. The resources aren't there. The tools aren't there. I know that is a barrier. That is a difficulty. And that's probably why you're more often at the Blackboard than you should be. But there are ways that you could get maybe some resources for a good price. Now, this is in the context of a developing country. Okay? Or maybe not even. You could even use it in a good country, a country that is developed. What about like job sites where people are working and it's at the end of the job site, there's always stuff being thrown in the garbage. I mean, good pieces of wood, tiles, bricks, even electrical supplies. At the end of the contract, you just throw it away. Why not go there and ask them if you could take some of that for your college? Or maybe go to a hardware store and ask them if you can have some of the stuff. Sometimes it just doesn't sell. What they have on the shelf just doesn't sell. Ask them, look, could we have it? Because it's for our students. And a lot of times they'll say yes. So sometimes you just have to be creative and approach people in the community to get those materials so your students can learn. Don't be scared to try new things. Be creative. Now, creativity will bring up their motivation. Don't forget that. That's very, very important. Be creative. Now, there's an old adage in French that says, I'll say it in French and I'll translate in English. C'est en forgeant qu'on devient forgeron. Maybe you speak French and maybe you know what I just said. Now, in English, it says, it's by smithing that one becomes a blacksmith. Now, we could say or compare that with practice makes perfect, but I like the idea, the visual of a blacksmith or somebody really blacksmithing, if you say smithing. You can't teach that trade with a book only. I mean, you can get a lot of things out of the book. You cannot teach that trade with simply a Blackboard. You can't teach that trade even with YouTube videos, even though they're good. The student, they need to do it to learn it. And they have to do mistakes. Now, I remember when I was in Haiti one day, at one of my first sessions, I went there back in 2014. And I told them, let your students do mistakes, because that's a way that they're going to learn. And they were surprised, because the way they were taught mistake is a bad thing. But in learning, it's actually a good thing. I'm not talking about evaluations here. I'm talking when you're practicing. Because when you make a mistake and you realize, I didn't do that right. I should have done it this way. What happens in the mind? They think, next time, I'll do it better. So let mistakes happen. If you see someone that is going to do a mistake, one of your students, let him do that mistake. Unless it's going to hurt someone or it's going to be very, very, very costly, don't let him do it. But if it's just a small mistake, let him do it. So he can learn by that. That's very, very important. So they need to do it. In order to learn a trade, we need to do it over and over again. Very important. Now they say, you'll get this. They say that we learn, or we memorize 10% of what we read. So we remember 10% of what we read. So reading is good, but we only get 10% out of it, typically, for some people. Now, we understand, or we learn by hearing it also, right? So 20% of what we hear, we remember. Okay? And some people, some students, you can say they're auditory learners. So when they listen, that's how they learn the best. Some students is by reading, some students is by doing, kinesthetics, right? But 20% of what we hear, it gets in our memory if we're motivated and if we're awakened and everything. 30% of what we see, we can remember. So 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see. So when we can see it done. So for instance, let's say you are a carpenter and you're showing your student how to do something. He's going to see it. He's going to remember that. If you just tell him how to do it, well, he might get some things here and there. But if he sees you doing it, he's going to remember even more. Now listen to this. We remember 50% of what we hear and see. Hear and see. 50%. So if they can hear it, so let's say you're explaining something as you're doing it. You're explaining to them what you are doing, and they can see it with their own eyes. So there's something going in through the eyes, and there's something going into the ears. So they're even going to learn even more. Now, they're going to learn even more if they show it themselves. Okay? That's even more. So 90%, they say, if they say it and they do it. If they only say it, like just if they only say how to do it, they say, well, it's going to stick like 80%. But if you can ask them, okay, now it's your turn. You're going to show us how to do it. And you're going to tell us how to do it. So if they do that, 90% of what they were taught, what they've learned, they're only going to be able to explain it. So imagine if you're just there at the blackboard, writing, and they're taking notes. They're reading. Okay? Like, yeah, they're getting maybe 30%. Imagine if you're just talking to them, to a crowd, just like a lecture, with no notes. They're hearing you. They're getting 20% of it. Imagine if you just tell them, well, we'll go read chapter 2. Well, okay. They'll get 10% maybe out of it. But if you show them how to do it, you explain it while you're doing it, and then you ask them to show you, or to show the rest of the class, how to do it, and even explain it to the class, they're going to really understand how to do it. So it's very, very important. So I'll go back to my initial question. Can we teach trades with a blackboard? Well, yes, we can. There's certain things that we need the blackboard to teach them, you know, math or concepts or drawings or whatever. Yes. But make sure that's not the only thing that you're using, the only tool or resources that you're using. Be conscious of that. Try to make sure that the students are able to practice what they're being taught. Very, very important. Like in French, we say, c'est en forgeant qu'on devient forgeron. In French, it's by smithing that one becomes a blacksmith. Thank you.